Hi, everybody. Welcome to Newsnight for Friday, April 29th. Hope you had plenty of the royal wedding. We got a lot to talk about tonight. A royal pain in the butt for Akron police. They don't get the raises they were expecting. Summit County Sheriff says there's a service, a key one, that he can't provide anymore. And what to do about a local football coach accused of punching a player. Those stories and more next on Newsnight. Finally, some sunshine after all this week of rain. Hopefully some hot discussion tonight. Great to have along Steve Hoffman from the Akron Beacon-Journal. And also great to welcome Stephanie Warsmith, also from the Akron Beacon-Journal. All right, plenty of local topics to get to, but did you get your fill of the wedding, the big wedding this morning?
I have to admit I didn't pay any attention.
Well, you're a woman and you didn't pay any
I know. We were saying earlier that Princess Di, I was totally into it. I guess I was a little younger and, you know, was into all the romance and all that. But this time, you know, I know what her name is, but beyond that, that's about all.
Yeah, the television was on at our house. My wife had it on as we were getting ready for our day, and I must admit I watched for about 30 seconds, and that was about it.
My wife actually had a princess hat on this morning, like
Wow.
one of the old-fashioned ones.
Well, there were all kinds of cocktail recipes floating around for what you could have first thing in the morning watching the wedding, but we abstained because we're both hardworking.
Absolutely.
People.
Maybe later, Steve.
Maybe later.
Well, we know that's the big topic of the day, but locally, Akron police officers very frustrated this week that the raises they were expecting in their paychecks last week didn't come. City Hall says, we just don't have the money regardless of the ruling. Does this have any merit in court, or are they just going to end up having to pay this in back pay eventually?
Well, unfortunately, I think this is in court, and so there may well be a ruling, and the city may have to eventually cough up the money. The larger context here, I think, has to do with the cuts in the local government fund, which, I mean, I think people knew were coming, but no one knew exactly how much. And this is another example of what happens. Obviously, this Senate Bill 5 has ruffled a lot of feathers for many, many reasons. But I think this goes back to one of the core reasons that the bill started in the first place, which is these unelected arbitrators make a decision, locks a municipality or a unit of local government into a series of raises. It's not obviously a decision that's made totally in a vacuum, but stuff changes. In this case, it was a pretty big change. This is about, what, 12% of Akron's budget is local government funding. So they're getting a pretty good cut. What do you do? I mean, if you don't have the money, you got to take it from somewhere. So the one possibility is that the police could get their raises eventually, and it's going to have to come out of somebody else's hide. How fair is that?
Or it could be that you have police officers getting raises but then getting laid off.
So the city's kind of caught in a rock and a hard place, but if binding arbitration is what it is, aren't they bound to at least start paying the raises?
Well, I know what Plusquellic says about this, and Sherry Cunningham, the law director, they say, you know, this is a remedy that we are allowed under the law. And we don't feel that the conciliator and the fact finder behind that ruled properly, and so we have this remedy, and we feel like it's our duty to appeal this. And I know when I talked to Plusquellic about it recently, he said, we're going to appeal it as high as we can.
In talking with some police officers this week who are frustrated about this, they believe, well, this same new contract also requires them to pay more in health care costs. They're not going to be appealing that. They're still going to be expected to pay more out of their pocket. Aren't they? Shouldn't they be getting something in this deal?
Well, the way these negotiations play out, unfortunately, they're playing out against a backdrop of tough times for revenue, and they're playing out against a state budget hole that's pretty significant. May not really be $8 billion, but whatever it is, it's significant. And at some point in any negotiations, in any setting, reality has a way of intruding. So like Stephanie's saying, at some point, something's got to give. And ultimately, there could be layoffs. So however you want to do this with wages, benefits, furloughs, layoffs, all these different things are it's all part of the same pie. My feeling is, at least in the short run, until the economy gains some more steam, that there are going to be adjustments that are going to be made regardless of Senate Bill 5, regardless of what a contract says. Something is going to give, and it's not pleasant. No one likes it, but until, like I said, until there's more in the pie, in the pot, if you will, I don't see any easy way out of this. Cities the size of Akron, they really can't merge with anybody very easily. They're already a pretty good size. They might be able to gain some efficiencies, but this is, as we've discussed, running a city is a very labor-intensive business. With police and firefighters, right. That's the dominant thing. That's what cities do, and at some point, it's very, very hard. You get a certain core number of people to police the streets or put out fires, and you're kind of stuck with that cost. You got to try to squeeze other things. I guess what I'm saying is those other things have probably been squeezed about as much as they can be squeezed at this point. I think. I mean.
Right, and then from the union perspective on this, they really feel like the city is not as dire of financial shape as is being portrayed, and that they continue to spend money on other things like economic development projects and traveling abroad to try to bring back jobs to Akron and other functions like that. And they're saying, why is it that you're spending money over here, but you're saying you don't have any money for us? And I think that in the backdrop of the, economic situation that Steve is talking about, that, you're continuing to see in cities like Akron and other cities this type of disagreement on the financial situation and on priorities.
And you mentioned priorities and finances. Another story involving law enforcement this week. In fact, in today's Akron Beacon Journal, involves Sheriff Drew Alexander and his team that monitors the sex offenders. Stephanie, this seems like a big issue that can't be ignored, but is it not going to be funded?
Well, it was interesting. I was covering a roundtable discussion yesterday with local government officials, and they were complaining about cuts that they may have to make if the reductions in the original state budget remain in there. And so Drew Alexander, one of the things, and I led the story off with it, I thought it was very interesting. He was saying, look, if these cuts remain, we're going to have to cut $2 million out of our budget and lay off 32, mostly deputies in our department. And one of the things that he said that they would get rid of is their program where they go out and check on registered sex offenders. They have 2 civilians and 3 detectives in that department. They would return those detectives likely to work at the jail. They would still have civilians checking registrations, when sex offenders have to register, which is the minimum required under the law, but they would no longer have the detectives going out and checking to make sure that people are living where they say they're living and that type of thing. So I just thought that was interesting, to say that a program like this was potentially going to go away.
What do you think?
Well, the problem with this sex offender law is precisely that if people put down the wrong address, or they move, or they just, somehow they start falling through the cracks. So if you're going to have this system, which is probably not terribly effective, to be honest, but if you're going to have it, and you don't have people going out actually checking on the addresses, you're really kind of giving people, in my opinion, a very false sense of security. I mean, as Stephanie's saying, you're getting to the point where you're relying on sex offenders to self-report, which is, if you're a sex offender, that's not exactly in your best interest, in the sense that, anybody in the neighborhood could figure out, they can go online and figure out what's going on. But it's another example of this, the breakdown of this agreement, longstanding agreement dating back to the 30s, as I think the mayor mentioned in your story,
right.
Of this revenue sharing agreement that really was a deal to gain support from local governments for statewide taxation. It dates back to the Depression era.
Okay, hold that thought. I want to continue this discussion now over on NewsNite.net.
For more NewsNight content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at newsnight.net.
He's one of Akron's most successful high school football coaches, making headlines twice in the last few weeks, all for things not so good. Tim Flossie, the head coach at Firestone High School. He's coached at Bookdale, Central, Barberton. He comes from an amazing family of football coaches. He won state championships. Now, as the paper's been able to point out, under fire for standing in the way of some kids who want to go to a rival high school, and now allegations being investigated that George Thomas brought up in the Beacon Journal this week, that he may have put his hands on a player, allegedly more than once, crossing the line. Shocking to the community. Where do we go with this?
The more serious matter, I think, to me, is anyway, is the transfer issue with the 4 football players from Firestone who want to go to Bookdale. And I'm certainly no expert in the Ohio High School Athletic Association. Is that even the right name? The problem with this association, it appears, is that they have rules, exemptions for these kinds of transfers, but they're rather porous. And apparently Flossie was in no mood to give these kids a break. And in other cases, kids do get a break. They can transfer like this, and there's no problem. So it appears you have a system with very, very little consistency in it, which is really too bad. And these football players all wanted to have, as I understand it, a better shot at a scholarship. Right. So this is a little different, I think, than some of these transfers that happen at the high school level. So I don't want to pick on Stark County, but especially in places like Massillon, are done for purely athletic reasons. I mean, your kid's a tight end, and the school he's in has too many tight ends, but the adjoining district needs a tight end. There you go. I mean, but this has a little different flavor to it, to me anyway. That just because these kids want a shot, and they probably need it. I mean, a scholarship would probably be a good thing for them. So it's just, it's too bad, and it looks like the coach has a little too much discretion in this one to me.
I think you mentioned about consistency and where some of these things go, and when you see it happen, and a kid can go from Ella to North and continue to play, and these kids, some of them, as I understand from George's article, are actually returning to their home district.
Right.
They actually open enrolled to go to Firestone. They want to go back to their home district. There's nothing keeping them from doing that. But why does one coach have the ability to block kids when other coaches simply allow their kids to do that? Seems like a lot of pressure on the schools to figure it out. But let's talk about this latest incident that's now being investigated. Is it surprising to anybody, though, that it's football? Don't coaches get physical with their kids once in a while?
Well, I thought it was interesting that this is Rebecca DiDonato Heimbaugh's son, and she's a former Akron school board member and magistrate, and her feeling on it is that that's not the way we do things anymore. I mean, I know that's what she said in George's article. He talked to her for the article, and she just said, maybe at some point, that's how things were done, but this isn't Woody Hayes' error. And as a former Buckeye, I'm sorry about that, Woody, but it's not something that you can do. It's not kosher anymore, and I'm not saying that it ever really was. But that was kind of the point that she was raising, and that she, that her son really didn't want her to complain about it, but she didn't want it to happen to other kids.
The district is now under the gun because it's almost May. They need to know, Firestone needs to know, those kids need to know who's going to be coaching in the fall.
Right.
Does his contract get renewed, or is this stand in the way of something like that? For an incident that allegedly happened in November. Does it seem like it's dragged on a little too long for something this simple? And I say simple only because it was an incident that either happened or didn't.
Right. It doesn't appear to be very complicated. Probably best to resolve it quickly. The sad thing about high school football to me is, it's a lot of fun. Kids have a great time. It's good for school spirit, all that stuff. But I think this intensity apparently shown by Flossie, this is a very steep pyramid. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of kids that play high school football. Very few of them go on to college. Very few of them go on to the pros. So, to be realistic, we really ought to be thinking also about, how do you make the high school a better high school academically? This has concentrated a lot of attention on football at a time when, as we've said, funding is being cut for schools. They're trying to figure out how to offer good programs that move these kids forward academically.
And there are decades of players who will come out to say that Flossie made a huge difference in their life.
Well, yeah, I mean, he is one of the best-known coaches in Akron. I mean, I didn't grow up in Akron, but I've been here, for 13 years now, and I know his name, even though I don't pay that much attention since I grew up in Grove City, Ohio. But I think everybody knows who Flossie is,
sure.
And yeah, I'm sure that there are lots of people, lots of former students, lots of former athletes who have come up under him who have had he's had a very positive impact on their lives.
We'll see the ruling here in the next few weeks and talk about it here on Newsnight. I do want to get on to one other topic involving the Akron schools. Subsequently, Kelly Williams-Bolar back in the headlines this week as the State Parole Board announces that it will decide within a week or so whether her case has merit to have a hearing for clemency. This was such a local conviction that interesting to think that the State Parole Board now may actually take this case.
Well, this case, we've talked about it. It's the story that will never end. Yeah. It will never go away. It will never be over. So, but I think it's interesting that it has gotten so much attention. I mean, it's really gotten international attention, and that the governor John Kasich took an interest in it. Although I do think that that it is being held up, as we've seen and as we've talked about on the show, for different reasons, other than why it really happened. That, Kasich is interested in it because he thinks that it can be held up as a reason for charter schools and school choice, which is a big issue, and vouchers, which are big issues for Republicans.
Politics at play in this?
Oh, we would never say that a politician was ever political.
Is that why you think he's making this a torch issue? Does he have a bigger agenda?
In a word, yes. The problem with many things our governor's doing is that they have a little bit of, in some cases more than a little bit, of an ideological edge to them. And you see we're kind of leaping in some areas before we're really looking. The leap is, the governor, jumped into this Kelly Williams-Bolar story with both feet. He said his staff had looked at it.
And his wife was interested.
His wife was interested. Okay, give him the benefit of the doubt. He did some diligence and looked at the facts. But there's no doubt that part of their agenda, the Republican agenda in Columbus, is school choice, expanding school choice. And this, to them, fits the pattern, even though Kelly Williams-Bolar said that's not what she was trying to do.
At one point he called her that woman up in Akron, as I recall, couldn't remember her name. We'll talk about the actual verdict when it comes
There's another case, there are cases like this all over the country. There's a new one that's popped up in Connecticut, Norwalk, Connecticut, and you can just see the right wing ready to pounce. They're looking for these, and these cases are starting to get more publicity because Ohio is certainly not alone in its structure of education. Many local districts of disparate quality, some have resources, some don't, and so you get people trying to shift around to put their child in a different environment, and whether it's academic, safety, whatever you want to call it. So it rekindles, every time you get one of these cases, it just sort of rekindles this larger debate.
And hopefully we'll have a ruling soon, and we can talk about it here on Newsnight.
On NewsNight.net, we cover a broader range of topics than we can on the air in 27 minutes. Be part of the conversation on our Facebook page and at NewsNight.net.
Believe it or not, Tuesday is Election Day. 17 school districts in Summit County, 10 of them have levies on the ballot coming up on Tuesday. And two of them, Cuyahoga Falls and Woodridge, making headlines this week because Cuyahoga Falls no longer has a superintendent. Woodridge has a superintendent who used to work in Cuyahoga Falls, Some think they should share a superintendent. Financial Times, doesn't seem like their boards want to go that way. Should they be looking at this a little harder to try to make it work?
They should be looking at this very hard. There have been talks over a decade, on and off talks, about merging, about joint operations, and everybody, it always seems that there's some last-minute objection to this. This is a ridiculous situation. Woodridge is itself a product of merged districts years ago. And then you had Northampton Township annexed by Cuyahoga Falls. So most of, certainly building-wise, a lot of big chunk of Woodridge is already in Cuyahoga Falls, which has its own school system. And so this is a no-brainer. Sure, there have been some people suggesting, oh, we ought to go after bigger savings, look at merging operations. Fine. But there's no reason you can't grab this opportunity right now and then continue talking. It's long overdue. These are districts that struggled years ago. They couldn't even figure out how to run a joint bus garage. I mean, this is how ridiculous it gets. So they really need to do something. Otherwise, as we were saying about safety forces and other things, the bottom line here is that the governor's thrown these local districts a challenge. He's with very little help. They're going to have to figure this out themselves. But you're going to get cut. Your funds are going to get cut. So you got to do something. And this kind of thing follows the pattern with Orville and Rittman. They started with a superintendent. Now they share other administrators. With modern technology and computers, there's no reason that...
the superintendent is such a key... I mean, obviously, it's the top guy in the district. Can he really give 100% service to two different school systems?
I think the proof in... obviously, if you had two very large districts, it wouldn't work out so well. This is a small district and kind of a medium-small district, I guess. So I think the answer is yes. I mean, obviously, if you have a tiny rural district that's very large geographically, you're going to have some issues. If you have two large districts merging and it gets too big, you're going to have deputy superintendents and that sort of thing. But this seems to be the right mix, as was Orville and Rittman. You're making administrative decisions. You have very similar populations. These communities fit like this. You're not mixing apples and oranges here. So you're making a decision administratively, whether you're a treasurer, a curriculum specialist, superintendent, personnel, that really, whether you have 20 employees or 200 employees, it's still the same kind of decision-making process. To me, it's a no-brainer. Sorry to go on, but
that's all right. Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, I remember from covering education that the Woodridge district, if you look at the shape of it, is very it's very strange. It's obvious, like Steve pointed out, that it's the product of annexations and different changes that have been made over the years. So I know when I was on education, I wrote about John Ritchie taking over or becoming the superintendent in both Orville and Rittman, and I do think that it has worked there. I think that Steve's right. I don't think that this would work for every district. You have larger districts that have very serious problems that they have to deal with within their own district, and then to take on the additional challenges in another wouldn't make sense. Does it for this? I think that you run into the same issues in some ways that you do when you talk about getting rid of a high school. That I think that some districts feel like they want that autonomy. High schools, you want to maintain that. And I think that Woodridge in some ways holds it up as sort of the equivalent of Revere. And so that might be, kind of playing into what's happening here. And so they want to sort of, maybe maintain their autonomy there.
There's some interesting cross currents here in that some of the smaller districts like Woodridge feel vulnerable. And there's some sentiment, at least by one Woodridge board member we quoted, that we really need to take these steps to save some money because that'll get the state off our back. They fear the state will come in and force them to consolidate. And then I think you have on the Falls side some hesitancy on the board because this guy he's now superintendent in Woodridge, and maybe they feel his loyalties wouldn't be properly split. Yeah. But I think Cuyahoga Falls traditionally has been more interested in merger. They see this, I think,
acquisition
as a more of a chance eventually to get their toe in the door and move toward a merger of the districts, which ultimately makes sense. So it's a complicated thing. As far as the autonomy is concerned, what's on the table now is just sharing a superintendent. Has nothing to do with combining schools, closing schools. The football team would still march out on the field on Friday night. None of that would change. And this is probably what we're going to see in the short run. We'll see districts that don't actually merge, totally combine, but we'll see the local board looking at a financial situation, saying, hey, look, here's an opportunity to work with an adjoining district, save money in the back office operations, and they'll do it via a contract, an agreement, which is fine. And the average person, the student, the parent is not going to, they're not going to notice any difference whatsoever. I mean, how often does the average parent want to go see the superintendent? And even if they did, I mean, it's not exactly like we're asking them to go to the next county to see the person. So, I mean, practically speaking, it's not going to have any effect, I don't think. And it will save some money. As the superintendent said in Orrville and Rittman, this is money. Initially, it wasn't a lot of money, but it was, as he put it, this is money that can be taken from the administration and put into the classroom.
Well, we'll see how that plays out, as well as these levies. We'll talk about them next week. Steve, Stephanie, thank you so much, and thanks for being with us. Have a great weekend, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the wedding. Hope you enjoyed our conversation tonight, probably in that order. Thanks for being with us. See you next Friday for NewsNite.